Hey everyone, this is TJ here from Mac Advisor UK. Today I'm going to be bringing you my first impressions on the iPad mini. Now I've been using this for about 24 hours now. I've had a good chance to sort of give it a good run through some of the things I regularly do on it. And impressions are generally good. There are a few downsides to it, which may be outweighed by some of the benefits depending on your use for this tablet. So I'm just going to go through some of the positive things to it. The first thing that I'm going to say, which you'll probably hear me say a lot and which I said during my unboxing, is just how thin and light this is. I mean, when you pick this up, you'll immediately hit you how thin and light it is. It's kind of like when you picked up the iPhone 5 for the first time and you were sort of wowed by sort of firstly the amazing build quality of it, and plus how it feels in your hand, just how thin and light it is. There goes that phrase being overused again, but it really is. So I would certainly recommend that you go, even if you're not going to buy one but you're tempted just to take a look at it, go down to a store and pick one up and you'll certainly be wowed by it. I've actually preferred picking this up when it's been sitting on my desk next to my MacBook Pro and I've sort of wanted to pick up my iPad to do something. I've had my third generation iPad as well by the side, and I've actually found that picking this up is a lot better because you can sort of pick it up one-handed. I think Steve Jobs used a quote with the second generation iPad when that was launched, when he said you can pick it up and it almost floats, and you certainly get that with this, just simply by the weight of it. The fact you can pick it up one-handed, you can hold it one-handed. The software is intelligent enough to know that you're resting your thumb on the side of the screen there. It's not going to, you know, sort of slide the screen from left to right when you sort of put your thumb on it. It's not going to launch any apps or press anything else. So I like the fact that that's built in. It doesn't necessarily work 100% of the time, but most of the time it will sort of generally recognize that you've got your thumb resting on there. I guess it depends on the position that you're resting it in, but the fact that you can just pick this up and use it one-handed is a delight. I've been picking this up more so than my third gen iPad, obviously because I've been testing it as well, but just for things like replying to email or just responding to tweets and that, I've just sort of been picking this up just because you can sort of pick it up and do things one-handed. Now using it for typing is a godsend, because generally you sort of have to rest the third generation iPad on your lap or on a hard surface and type on top of it as you would traditionally with the traditional keyboard, but this you can actually hold it from the sides and type in portrait mode. I can just type Apple in there relatively quickly. I've just found that typing on this, I prefer doing it in portrait position, and that you can reach the keys in the middle and beyond quite easily and type pretty fast. When you put it into landscape, you still get a larger keyboard. You can just about reach the middle on it, but I didn't find it as comfortable typing while holding it from both sides. I've found that I've had to sort of put it down and top type on it, which is what I'm going to name it, but you sort of have to top type on it as you do with the ordinary iPad, I've found. So I've been doing all my typing in portrait mode, which I've generally found that I'm using this in portrait mode more so than my third gen iPad. I generally have that in landscape, mainly because for typing reasons, for watching video, for reading occasionally I'll put it into portrait mode, but just for using various different apps and websites I generally just have it in landscape position anyway. But this I would use more in sort of a portrait position just because it's easier to type on, and the fact that you can just hold this one-handed. Now this is ideal for things like reading and watching video, because those things you would generally do holding it one-handed. I generally try and use my iPad in bed more late at night for catching up on watching video on YouTube and reading various different things, and I tend to have it in landscape position and hold it with one hand or prop it up with one hand, but because of the size and the weight of it, it sort of hurts your wrist after a while and you have to swap hands or hold it in a different position. You don't get that with this because obviously this is a lot thinner and lighter. And I found that for things like reading books, let me just go into iBooks here, I think I've got a book open. This just seems the natural form factor for a book because it's roughly the same size as a book. And I just found that when I've read a few pages on this, it just seems to be a nice way to read a book. I can imagine somebody sitting on a train or a bus going to work, reading a book on this. It's just going to be the ideal device for doing that, rather than looking around sort of one of the bigger, heavier iPads. And certainly late at night as well, if you're in bed reading a book, this is obviously going to be ideal for that again because it doesn't put as much strain on the wrist. The other thing I said was video. Now, where's the videos app? It's down here. I've been watching some videos on here, mainly YouTube videos, but I downloaded a film from iCloud. I've got Batman Begins here, and it isn't full HD video. But it runs perfectly well on here. It looks fine. I mean, this is only the standard definition version of the movie anyway. You're not going to be able to put HD movies on it, so any HD movies that you've actually bought, obviously they won't work on here because it's not a full HD display. But it will scale everything down, so if you've got 720p movies or just standard definition movies, they will work fine on here. I think generally if you're watching video, the quality probably doesn't matter so much on a portable device. If you're watching it on a big HD TV, you're going to want that full HD 1080p content if you've got like a Blu-ray player or something. But just for general watching video on this small device, I've not had a problem with watching movies that I've bought or watching YouTube videos. The quality's been perfectly fine. So no issues there. And again, you can obviously hold this with one hand when you're watching video for long periods. So again, as I said, if you're using this in bed, or maybe if you're traveling and you're watching a video on this, this is going to be ideal for one-handed use. One thing I will mention is I've got this in landscape mode now, and to me it looks a bit odd in landscape mode, maybe because of the smaller form factor or the smaller screen. So I've generally tended to use this in portrait mode. I would generally use my 3rd gen iPad in landscape. This looks fine in portrait mode. You can hold it one-handed, do things sort of one-handed with it, or hold it with one hand and do things with your other hand quite easily. But when I put it into landscape, whilst it's fairly usable and you can sort of hold it with one hand, the screen just looks a bit odd to me. I don't know why, maybe it's just because I'm used to the bigger screen on the 3rd gen iPad, but it just looked a bit odd. But it's something that I'm sort of getting used to over time. It doesn't look quite as odd now as it did when I first turned it into landscape mode for the first time. But that's just a minor thing for me, because I'm sort of used to sort of the larger iPad. Now I do like the design of this. I mean, you've got this slate back here, which looks fantastic. It's a change from the all silver back that we've had previously. You've got nice individual buttons for the volume here. Nice slate buttons, individual buttons for the volume up and down. A nice solid button there for the silent and ring, or you can obviously set that for the silent and ring. It's not a phone. Set that's sort of the mute switch, and you can obviously set it for the orientation lock. Now this does have stereo speakers on the bottom. This was sort of confirmed by Apple that it does have stereo speakers, because it didn't sort of mention that on the website. Now one issue I've had with that, which is one of the negative points, is whilst it does have a stereo speaker, I don't sort of get the benefits of it. I can't really sort of tell the difference all that much between the single speaker on the 3rd gen iPad and this, and I've generally covered up this one of the speakers, because when the speakers are actually in use, I'm probably watching video or playing a game, and if I'm playing a game I'm holding it two-handed, and this hand here on the right covers the bottom speaker. If I'm watching video, I'll probably hold it with one hand like so, and I cover that bottom speaker again. So you're really only getting sound out of this top speaker here, which is why I like the mono speaker on the 3rd gen iPad, because I can have the speaker up here, the sound comes out fine and I'm not covering it. If I flip the phone into the other orientation, if I'm playing video it's fine because I can hold it on the right and have the sound coming out the left hand side. But if I'm playing a game, again I'm still covering one of the speakers. So I don't suppose there's anything that you can do about that, but that was just one of the things I noticed, that whilst it does have stereo speakers, you're not necessarily going to get the benefit of them all the time. And essentially you could say it's just one single speaker, it's just split with a lightning connector in the middle. I mean, ideally I would like to see a speaker on the left and a speaker on the right, but that again would sort of look odd from a design perspective. But that was just sort of one of my minor points there, just one of the minor negatives about the fact that you're not necessarily going to get the benefit of the stereo speakers all the time. Now another negative was the controls. Now this is just from me purely coming from a larger iPad. I noticed that a lot of the UI controls are smaller, so if I go into settings, all the options down the left hand side are a lot smaller, and you'll see that my thumb here nearly covers these 3 options, so you do have to be careful sometimes on what you're actually clicking on. I mean tapping, but you get the idea. It depends what you're sort of tapping on, you just sort of have to tap it more precisely. And if I go into Safari, I've got the bookmarks bar across the top, and these are a lot smaller than I'm used to, certainly, so you do sort of have to be more precise and a lot more careful at what you're actually tapping when you're using the controls. And obviously I found myself zooming in a lot on the actual display, because I mean you've got these options here at the top of the Apple homepage, and I did find myself zooming in more to tap onto the various different navigational elements around different websites. That was one of the things that I noticed, that things like controls are a lot smaller, and obviously within different apps as well. And I've been using different apps on this and playing games, and games tend to work fine. I mean, I've been playing Infinity Blade 2, and this works perfectly on here. I mean, this has an A5 processor in it. The 3rd gen iPad has the A5X, so it does have improved graphics, but most of that extra graphics power will be to drive the Retina display. So I was expecting perhaps a little bit of slowdown or not as powerful graphics when playing Infinity Blade 2. Now, the only thing that does stand out when you're playing high-end games is you don't have the crispness of that Retina display, but certainly just from a perspective of playing this game for about an hour yesterday, everything else is fast and fluid. Even just when you're sort of in the middle of a battle, I expected that I would notice some sort of slowdown ever so slightly, but I didn't get any of that at all. It runs perfectly well, just as fast as on my 3rd generation iPad. So not an issue for playing high-end games, which is something that I do a lot on my 3rd generation iPad. So that was just one of the things I was perhaps slightly worried about, that if I did decide to go with an iPad mini, what would games look like on here? Again, they're not going to be as crisp as on the Retina display, but they will sort of function fine in terms of the graphics on here. So I've covered a few of the minor negative points. Obviously, the main negative of this is it doesn't have a Retina display, which isn't an issue. I mean, if I decided to purchase an iPad mini, it would be something I would have to put up with, and I think I could manage. It's just that when you go back to looking at a Retina device, you realise what you're missing out on. But if you're looking for something portable, thin and light, and you want something in the smaller form factor, that's one of the compromises that you're going to have to make at this stage. And even though this does have the lower resolution display, I've actually found myself picking this up and using it more so than my 3rd gen iPad. Yes, obviously I've been testing it, but just the fact that you can pick it up and it's really light, you can do it with one-handed use. And as I said, once you've sort of been using this for sort of 10 or 15 minutes, if you're in the middle of reading something and you're engrossed in what you're doing or playing a game, you tend not to notice that it isn't a Retina display. It's only when you sort of step back that you realise that the display isn't sort of what you're used to in a Retina device. Now, obviously, if you've never owned a Retina device, then that's not going to be an issue for you. If you're somebody like me whose devices are all Retina, then obviously it is going to be a slight step backwards. But again, it's one of those compromises that you have to make and decide whether you're going to stick with the Retina iPad or whether you're going to go with the iPad. It all depends whether you need the smaller form factor and the portability of the device, but it is one of the trade-offs that you would have to make. I mean, if this had a Retina display in it, then I think this would be sort of a 10 out of 10 device, and I think a lot more people would go out and buy it. Maybe they'll put a Retina display in the 2nd iPad mini, we'll just have to wait and see, but I suspect cost and battery life played a large part in that technical decision. But this does run all the 275,000 tablet optimized apps. I've got various apps here that I have used on my 3rd gen iPad, and these just all work perfectly well on here. They look great, they work just as good. As I said, some of the controls may be a bit smaller on here compared to what you're used to on sort of a larger tablet, but that said, all the apps work fine on here. Games run nice and smooth. I've seen some people have compared this to some of the other 7-inch tablets with regards to games, and they tend to slow down and the frame rate isn't quite as good as compared to the iPad mini. Obviously, I've not done any tests on that because I don't have another 7-inch tablet to compare it to, but I would say for gaming you're certainly alright with going with the iPad mini. Now, one of the big questions is, a lot of people have been saying, will you sort of swap your 3rd gen iPad in for this iPad mini? At this stage, I don't know. I'm in two minds, because although this doesn't have the Retina display, that's sort of the big drawback for me on this device, something that I really would like. But just when you pick this up and hold it, you sort of get that feeling that you really want one. And the fact that I've been picking this up and been actually more pleased using this for certain things on my 3rd gen iPad, and I was sort of fully opposed to saying, no, I don't really want a 7-inch tablet, I'd rather stick with the larger one. But this is sort of growing on me, and I'll have to see how I get on over the next few days, whether I would accept that lower resolution display for some of the benefits that it offers. But then when I go back and look at my 3rd gen iPad, I see the bigger screen, the Retina quality icons on there, and I just think I'd rather stick with the 3rd gen iPad. So I'm in two minds at the moment, so we'll just have to see how I get on. I think I would probably like to see what the 5th generation iPad offers, particularly if it has sort of the same design as this. I mean, I love the back on this nice slate back, and I expect that they'll make the 5th generation iPad a similar sort of design to this, with make it thinner, make it lighter, maybe improve battery life, and just give it sort of that. I expect they'll probably give you the same sort of slate or white and silver design with that as well, so that would be interesting to see. So at this point in time, I'm undecided on whether I would buy an iPad mini and get rid of my 3rd gen iPad. I'll just have to see over the next few days. One thing I will mention before I go is battery life. I expect this will get the same 10 hours of battery life that you used to on other iPads. Some have said they've got 11 hours out of it. I fully charged this yesterday when I received it. I'm still on that same charge. It's got 39% left. I've been using it most of the day yesterday, using it in bed last night for gaming, for watching video and doing various other tasks on it. And I've used it today as well, and it's on 39% battery. So I'm expecting you're going to get very good battery life out of this. I think perhaps it will last more so than my 3rd gen iPad. I tend to do a lot more gaming on my 3rd gen iPad, so obviously the battery eats down a lot quicker. But I expect you probably get decent battery life out of this as well. So anyway, those are sort of my first impressions on the iPad mini. Generally, overall, it's positive. I like the size. It's sort of almost 8 inches. It seems to be the ideal size. The fact that it's thin and light, there goes that phrase again. And the fact that you can use it one-handed for a lot of things is a plus for me. Some of the things I obviously didn't like was the fact that you didn't get the benefit of the stereo speakers all the time, depending on how you're holding the device. Smaller UI controls, which I think is just me coming from that larger display, and it's just something that I perhaps need to get used to. And obviously the main downside for this is the fact that it isn't a Retina display. But if you've never had a Retina display, or you've sort of got half and half, then obviously this is going to be great. Or if you're prepared to make that trade-off in functionality, the portability of it, then obviously you're going to have to make the trade-off and go with that lesser display. And I think to some degrees it's something that you could probably live with. I mean, it's not a bad display, it's bright, it's colourful, shows you everything that you're doing. It just isn't as crisp as the Retina display. So it's one of those things that perhaps you'll have to make a trade-off on and decide whether you're going to go for this or something else. So those were my first impressions of the device. I will be doing a review in a few days, and I'll put out a comparison to the 3rd gen iPad as well. So if you've got any comments or questions at this stage, then as always you can submit a comment below. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter and message me on there if you wish. Those links are below, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.